Hello, BookTube. This is week 4 of the Future History Project. Week 4 for me. I'm a bit behind because this time of year is really busy for me. So this is the brainchild of Sean D. Stanfast with the channel the same name to do the Future History Project written over a lifetime by Isaac Asimov. And these are the robot stories we're on right now. They tie in eventually with the Galactic Empire and the Foundation and all that. So right now we're reading out of the Complete Robot. 2 Powell and Donovan stories and then 3 Susan Calvin stories this week. Like I say, I'm going to try to catch up, which should be doable. So Reason is the first story, and that was April 1941 in Astounding Science Fiction. And Catch the Rabbit is the second story. And there were a total of 4 that I know of Powell and Donovan stories. And Reason is very, very good story for a couple reasons. Reasons, right? It's going to pop up everywhere. Powell and Donovan usually get the short end of the stick on jobs, and as much humor as there is in these, you find out that it's probably because they're pretty good at their job. And in Reason, they go out to a transmitter. It's a power generating place, and it sends a beam of power to wherever humanity decides they need the power delivered. And part of that rotation is they send it to the Earth, which could be dangerous. You don't want to be sending a bolt of energy to the Earth and not knowing what you're doing. So they're going to transfer the humans out of the station and basically have it all done by robots. And a robot's put together by Powell and Donovan over there, and the robot uses reason to deduce that humans aren't quite what the robot would expect as a creator, so he doesn't buy it that they're his creator. And the robot is adamant. Following logic, it's just said this is impossible. And this causes frustration for our heroes because they know, although they have doubts sometimes, which is sort of funny, that they did indeed put this robot together and that robots were created by humanity. And the robot has put itself as sort of a messiah type figure, or a priest type figure or something, in between the energy converter and transmission station and the other robots. And for their own protection, Powell and Donovan are locked away, and all sorts of comic things intrude, but there's a serious worry what happens when this energy transmission takes place to Earth. And needless to say, the robot's better at it than the humans are anyway. And then the conclusion is drawn that is what it is. The robot's still doing the job, but it doesn't really matter what the robot thinks. So it's a good way to talk about the laws of robotics, the efficiencies of robots, how people, and by extension, in this case, robots, think about reason and logic. What's your founding premise? How do you build your chain of reasoning? It's quite fun. I really enjoyed the story. The next one, Mike Donovan and Powell had just done a vacation, and they're let's see, they have to go to a mining place. I can't remember the name of it, where they are for the mining. So the United States Robots and Mechanical Men has sent robots to do some mining on this planet, and we find out that there's a robot that can direct other robots through positronic waves, and nobody's quite sure how this is working. And Powell and Donovan realize when these groups are working and mining, they're not bringing home any. They're not delivering the goods. They're not bringing home any of the material, none of the ore. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. Then they see the robots will start acting weird, dancing, doing all sorts of strange things. And you work your way through the story, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with these robots and their strange behavior, and why there's no ore. The whole point to be there is to get the ore. So the main robot basically is having a bit of a breakdown, and to push the case, Powell and Donovan end up causing a mining accident, because they figure that's one way to figure out what's going on here. They do it. They accidentally trap themselves and manage barely to get rescued, because they shoot one of the robots, and this causes a reaction. So it's interesting. Again, it's a test of the 3 laws of robotics, and so I liked the story. I liked the reason a little better, but I did like this one. It's well worth a read. This week was sort of strong for the stories, I thought. There's some oddities to them, but they were written a long time ago. The next set of stories are the Susan Calvin stories. So we have Liar, which was May 1941, an astounding science fiction. Satisfaction Guaranteed, 1951, and Amazing Stories. And then Lenny, 1958, in infinity science fiction. So, Liar, let me just get to it here for you. I get all these, reading all these short stories. I want to make sure that I get it positively done here. We have a robot that for some reason is able to read minds, and nobody can figure this out. And then Susan Calvin, who we've had sort of hinted at in some of the other stories, is in the room, and a couple of other employees of U.S. robotics. And nobody really knows but the 3 of them that this has happened. The guy who discovered it managed to get the robot away, locked away, and they're deciding they're going to try to figure this thing out and do what they can before it damages the company and word gets out. So they each look at it in their own way. Mathematics, Susan Calvin is whatever a robot psychologist is, but there you have it. They each, being humans, have their own flaws or just characteristics, whatever. And the robot, by reading their minds, and with the laws of robotics, which are, number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. That plays out a lot here. And second law is a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except for where such orders would conflict with the first law. And then the third law is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So here, by trying to prevent harm, the robot, by reading their minds, realizes there's a lot of psychological stress in being a human being, and the robot's trying to relieve that, right? Because it can't, through an action, allow a problem. And so we see each of these characters being given stuff as almost a therapy by the robot, but the robot doesn't really understand humans enough to do this. So Susan Calvin, who seems to be in danger of spinsterhood, I guess, it's sort of an old-fashioned take on some of the characters, but it was written a long time ago, is secretly has a bit of a crush on one of her co-workers, and the robot tries to convince her that it's reciprocated. And then one of the other guys is a little power hungry, and he thinks he's, robot convinced him he's got the job. And this sort of thing. So everything gets a little crazy. The humans interact with each other oddly, and it's pretty funny. But in the end, Susan Calvin uses the second law, that the robot must obey orders, because things have gotten way out of hand, and sets up a loop in the robot's brain, positronic brain, which proves the robot's undoing because he really is dangerous. It does show Susan Calvin being a little vicious, so it was something interesting to watch. She gives me a Spock vibe at times, where from Star Trek, who was all logical and fierce and cold, but Spock also had emotions. But in this case, Susan's was quite an effective assassin. Let's put it that way. So let me see, where am I at here? So the next story is just a charming story. Talk about dated. This is satisfaction guaranteed. We have a executive, up and coming executive. That caller's driving me nuts. Up and coming executive at U.S. Robotics and Mechanical Men, and his wife, who is a very 1940s, 1950s type of wife. Sort of probably wouldn't even have stood out back then, but for us, or at least for me reading it, just it made it have like an old world feel, an old dated from a time before type of feel, which is fine because it's sort of juxtaposed with that futuristic stuff too, so sort of interesting. But you have the typical stereotypical housewife. You know, you can almost see the guy with his briefcase going off to work, and you get it's implied that she stays home and cleans and makes supper and does all those things, which are fine if that's what she wanted to do, but apparently she does not, because she's not very happy. She feels like her husband doesn't think she's very smart. She feels outclassed by women in the social set he wants to be part of, everything from their house to her hair to the clothing. So you have these concerns, and as part of his march up the corporate ladder, he's given an opportunity, and that's to have a robot stay in their house for a couple of weeks and work just with his wife. It's a housekeeping robot, but more than that. And it's very handsome, wavy black hair. She's not sure if it's plastic or if it's real hair. Excuse me. And the robot, she's scared of. She's terrified of robots, which we get the impression of a lot of people are. And how they build a relationship and how the robot helps her and helps her with her central problems, which are her husband's view of her and the social set's view of her. So they do everything from a house makeover to a her makeover, physically and clothing-wise and stuff, even to the point where the robot, at the end, when she's having a big party, sort of the penultimate experience, makes it look like they were lovers, and then the robot's gone. So her status is enhanced with all the complications that go with that. And it's just a wonderful story if you can get past the dated feel, which most readers can, because we read stuff from all sorts of time frames, right? So I really like this story because I like the idea how it explored, well, what does that law mean that you don't want anybody to come to harm? And what kind of harm is there? Is there psychological harms? Are there physical harms? All this stuff there are, of course. But wonderful story. Let me see, where am I at here? So then, the last one here is Lenny. Let me just turn to that. It's the most recent one I've read, so hopefully I can get the details right. It's a little cold out here still. We have a lot of ice around. Let's see. Oh, Lenny is this is an interesting story. And again, Susan Calvin's, her own psychology comes into play. The company, U.S. Robotics, decides they're going to have sort of a public day where you can walk through and tour the facilities. And they'd have safety measures in place. But somebody sort of slips up on the job and a computer keyboard is not disabled or whatever. And a 16-year-old boy walks by and rattles it with his fingers, and it sets off a chain reaction where they end up with a robot who's just totally messed up positronic brain. And it exhibits behaviors that would indicate it was a child. Susan Calvin starts to study this robot. They try to figure out what's going on. it's interesting how they work their way through the process of let's figure this out. But in the meantime, their own human emotions are always impacting this. A group of younger employees, or at least that's the way I read it, get a bet going on office pool, and one guy draws the unlucky straw and sneaks in to Calvin's quarters and her lab and all that, and trying to figure out what's going on with this robot who they think is making some weird noises, and it is. And when a movement by the employee causes the robot, who's got to protect itself, to slap the hand out of the way. The problem is the robot's like a baby, and it doesn't know its own strength. It breaks the guy's arm, causes an emergency. If everybody on Earth finds out about that robot harming somebody, things could get bad. Because the company has touted safety and the 3 laws of robotics to the point where they're almost mundane, even though they're not really allowed to operate on Earth. Calvin is shown as having sort of maternal instincts and taking over the education of this child. She comes up with this plan where she's saying the company's so safe nobody wants it. The whole reason they had the tours is they're trying to get new roboticists and people be interested in the company and all that, and it's not really working well. She's saying because there's no danger, there's no risk, there's no challenge. So she proposes setting up a facility on the moon, emphasizing the danger, emphasizing the adventure, and that sort of wraps it all up. So another strong story, I thought. The maternal instinct and all that, a little heavy-handed, I think is fair to say, but it works. All those stories this week were pretty good. Well, were real good, actually. I think that play between almost we do have a robot psychologist, right? But and then the psychology of the humans and how things are, that interplay is what's really interesting in the story. So, yeah, good week. I'm going to try to catch up here real quick. I'm out here freezing to death. You probably see me shaking a little bit, but this was the place to film today. I hope everyone's well, and I'll try to get this posted. And thank you, BookTube.